Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the calls. I hope that all of you had a great break for the 4th of July week. And if it was anything like my family, historically, the 4th of July time is a time of gathering, but we've seen so much of each other. We said, we'll ship you out and just let us be on our own without the house full of kids. So we jokingly said we're sick and tired of each other, but we still had a great time during that little break. A couple of things I want to mention to you before we get going. A reminder to mute your device when you are on the call. And also, we're going to be using the chat as we always do. So please put all of your questions, ideas, thoughts into chat. We'll be monitoring that throughout the calls. We have a number of really important topics today that we'll get to. I just first of all want to reach out and say thank you. Thank you to this group of lead participants and liaisons. Last week, we needed some information at the league office, and we sent an email out to ask for some real specific information from you. And incredibly, and thank you, by the end of the workday, in a single day, we had over 250 responses back. And if you've ever sought information before electronically, you're lucky to get a 25% return rate, but what you provided us was fantastic, and it was a continuation of the information you've been sharing with us since we started the LEAD network. So thanks for that. Thanks for all you provided us last week. And as always, what you've given us and what you give us in the LEAD calls takes us to the directions and the directives that you need us to address when we do prepare for participation. So just again, overall from the entire staff at the league, thank you. It was really, really overwhelming to see that response. So that being said, we're now going to move into the specific agenda items for today. And also a reminder that we did, and I see Laura left the slide up there for me, during the break, we did use some alternative methods to provide you some information to keep you connected. And Bob was great at putting those videos together for you. He is not a one-take wonder. It usually takes him about 10 to 15 takes to get that little video out to you. So thanks again for that. So we'll move to the next slide now, Laura, and we'll talk about a couple of things here. I'll turn it over to Bob here real quick. Just a reminder, the summer waiver period, my point to you is, remember, we extended it a week. So it goes into August. The last day of the summer waiver period will be August 7th. So that quick reminder. And then now I'll turn it over to Bob. Bob, you want to take it from here, please?
Great. Thank you for acknowledging those wonderful videos as well. I'd like to thank you and commend you. I don't believe any of us are working on what we did a year ago. Your flexibility and your work in approving summer coacher waivers and making sure coaches are offering opportunities and access to student athletes in the manner in which you're doing so is very different than what you did a year ago. What we know is that the document from June 19th from the MDH hasn't changed. Things like pod sizes, competitions, etc. are still in place. What we also know is that we have had schools that have experienced positive COVID tests with their student athletes, and many of what I hear from schools that have had this, it's originated at a graduation party or a cabin or a larger student gathering of sorts. So that being said, we asked Troy Stein from Edina, who's also a board member and liaison, if he would share his experience around positive COVID testing in his community. Troy?
Thanks, Bob, and good morning, everybody. To your point about a nice relaxing summer and using up some of that vacation, it didn't really happen. I had a little breakout. It was the last 2 days in June and into July and over the 4th. It was about 7 or 8 days where we had over 20 student athletes that tested positive. And Bob asked if I could share a little bit about what I learned and if anything, share out anything that you all can learn from that experience. As we went through it, I remember telling our superintendent at the time, like, we're writing right now the protocols for the return to school if we are going to have in class procedures. So a little bit about it. Ours started with one kid going to a party at St. Thomas, and then he was an alumni who went to a cabin, who visited some other kids at a cabin who were Edina High School students. They came back and infected a bunch of other friends, and it was all through social gathering. And that's the biggest challenge I think we have in front of us is we are all following these protocols in our 2 hours or an hour and a half of practice, but our kids are still socializing, and getting that message out to our students and families of how important it is for their return to sports and activities and school is following those protocols. We shut down some of our camps and clinics. We did not shut down all of them, even though we had infection in just about every one. The first thing we had to figure out was which ones did we own and which ones did we not. And the summer waiver is certainly gray, and we've all struggled with that more than ever this summer. We took on that gray area and probably took on ownership more than we should have in terms of providing guidance. At the end of the day, it kind of looks like an Edina camp or clinic and feels like it, then we're going to support that. We did touch base with legal counsel, and if they're on our facilities, they did say that they should be following our procedures and protocols. The challenge was we didn't really have any procedures and protocols, so we were writing them as we went. I'll share those in a Google Doc as well when I'm done talking. If they're helpful, great. There's nothing special in terms of what we've done. We just put some things down in paper. But first and foremost, get your district health coordinator involved, get your administrative team involved, get your trainer involved in the process and discussion. That was helpful from the beginning. We created some templates and communication in terms of sending information out to families. We put our coaches on point with the communication, but we had templates that we provided for them so they could just change out some dates. Obviously, you're keeping names confidential. You do have to report any positive cases to MDH. We put our district health coordinator in charge of reporting those out. As I said, we were more cautious in the beginning. We shut down some entire camps. We shut down some pods. And in some cases, we were socially distanced through the whole practice. And we didn't feel we had to shut it down. And MDH has come out with some guidance around 6 feet for a continuous 16, within 6 feet for a continuous 16 or 15 minutes. And so, that's been some new language that we've learned as well, and are working to incorporate that as we return to school in the fall. We've learned that it's important. It was convenient for us in terms of we weren't practicing every day. So when we were doing our tracing, we could pinpoint when they were at a practice and when they were at a social gathering and how they maybe didn't overlap. As I look to the fall, it's going to be really important for us to make sure that we're in pods as much as possible. I've even sent a message out to my coaches saying, I highly encourage you to rethink your practices, and you need to be in pods and small groups almost all the time, because you're going to be more than likely practicing every day. And if you are going to do a large group practices together, maybe you need to think about every other day practice to help with some distancing with that piece. Again, those are just ideas that we're wrestling with after going through what we did. And at the end of the day, in talking with parents and kids and communicating with families, they want to return to play. And so it was enlightening for our families to realize that they're behind this in terms of our ability to return. And they understand that if they can't do some of these things that we're being asked, social distance, wearing a mask, we're going to have a hard time returning to play in the fall. So with that, I'll put some information in the chat. You're always welcome to give me a call. I'll put my cell phone in. You can always give me a call if there's anything that I can help you with. Wish you all the best of luck in returning this fall. Thank you.
Awesome, Troy. Thanks for sharing. Really appreciate it. And I know that you and I talked about this as you were going through it, and we appreciate you extending out the information as well to the member schools. Troy also, for those of you that don't know, is one of our lead liaisons, but he also serves on our board of directors. Troy was on the eligibility committee last year and is moving into the position of treasurer for the league on the board this year. So we're scanning through the chats. We'll be able to get to some of them a little bit later. We do have a lot of really important information to share in a call. So if we can't get to all the chat, just understand we will respond to them on the microsite. So I will now turn it over to Eric. Eric's going to share some information initially from our recent board meeting. Eric.
I'll unmute. How about that? So thank you so much, Craig, and good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for your time. 313 participants on the call right now. Your work throughout the summer has been incredible and amazing, and it just never ends, and we recognize that and appreciate all that you're doing. Our board of directors has been a committed group for quite some time, and I'm honored to work with these individuals. We had 6 members go off the board, and it may not be what you want to hear from me, but I think it's really important to recognize the 4 years of commitment from Dr. Joel Boyd, Rob Carpentier from Cristo Rey, Jill Johnson from Waconia, Chris Thompson from Buffalo, Eric Latola at Andover, and Bonnie Spohn-Schmaltz, a 2-year president from Eden Valley Watkins. And we are welcoming new folks in, and I would guess that the majority of our board are on this call as well. So your information always flows to them, and they have the opportunity to see and be able to respond and react to what you have to say. Our board has been working really hard. You probably know that we had a workshop on Monday. That workshop could have lasted 6 hours. We limited it to just under 3. And tried to cover as much as we could. Was the formal approval of the pre-participation physical clearance, and that again extends any expiring physical that's in place right now beginning March 13th of this year. It will be extended through the end of the coming school year, so through the 2021 school year, and the executive committee had acted on that. That information is in our microsite, but that is now official and completely approved. The 2 probably major aspects that spent our time on, and no question it's what you're spending your time on, is return to participation, and what does that mean? And for us, that return to participation plays right into our financial picture. Our financial picture was in really good shape looking forward. There have been some challenges in the past, but our board has done a great job to right-size things under a set of dynamics and realities that are no longer necessarily in play. And so the board took action after a lot of discussion to create 2 task forces. And one task force is return to participation, and you're going to hear more about that. And I know that that's primary for you right now. The second one is a finance task force. And so what I would say just in terms of general information is that in a $9 million budget, generally more than $7 million of our revenue typically comes in through tournament revenues, be it tickets, broadcast, or sponsorship. We know with the coming year that tournaments are a huge question mark, and yet we are moving forward with programming, and we're doing everything we can to provide opportunities for students. So we need to take a look at how do we make our league sustainable in the current situation and also going forward. And that's going to be the focus of this finance task force. Our goal is to get representation from a variety of schools using our finance committee as well as other individuals who could be in a position of AD or maybe an administrator at a principal or a superintendent level, as well as school board association member, to just get the best picture of how we can take a look at creating a sustainable model going forward financially. And so that group will be activated very soon. Both of these task forces really have a short timeline because our next board meeting will be on August 4th. And so with a workshop on the 3rd, which is typical this time of year, we need to pull some information and give them models to be able to take a look at and then make decisions as we go forward and build that forward. So that will be the major part of what we're looking at, is how can we remain sustainable. Just a couple of notes for you that we continue, as you do, to look at budgets. We've made reductions already. We've had some staff members that unfortunately we have had to release, and that's not an easy position to be in. But in the last 18 months, we're down 17% of staff. And when you only start with 24, that goes really fast. And so just a note that we continue to take action similar to what schools are looking at or considering as we go forward, and trying to make sure that that we're able to provide the services and the opportunities that have historically been a part of this. One other thing that we recognize is, again, as Craig said, that communication has been incredibly effective, and your response to us has been great. And so our board also, through the executive committee, passed a resolution to ask for a survey of our member schools to try and get the best information we can about what your needs are in the current situation, how the work that the league is doing right now is meeting your needs, what we can do better or what we can do more of, so that we can be a responsive board and staff to be able to provide the leadership that you need, the communication and the resources that are out there. So please be looking for that in the next week, and we'll look for a quick turnaround so we can again pull information back for our board for August 3rd and 4th. And so a very activated and involved board of directors. Thanks to all 20 members. We really appreciate your work and the way in which you interact with those around you. So with that, Craig, I'll turn it back. And if there are questions, please let me know.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. A lot of really important issues were discussed at the board workshop and at the board of directors meeting this week. So great job here of highlighting that for everyone. And then Bob and I are going to work in the next information coming from some of it coming from the board of directors meeting in respect to the 2 task force, but we're going to talk about the return to participation task force and what that looks like. So Bob, I'll turn it over to you, and you and I will kind of tag team this one as we move forward and talk about what's going to happen very rapidly for the return to participation committee as we get information ready for the upcoming August 3rd and 4th board meeting. Bob?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Craig. And we're going to meet this afternoon, this task force return to participation. We're about 12 members, a mixture of liaisons, our eligibility committee, and then a couple of others added onto that to assist us. And what you're gonna hear from us is we're gonna try and find an opportunity to have every sport and/or activity throughout the year. That means we may have to look at things a little bit differently than we traditionally have. Keeping in mind, the governor, the MDH, the MDA are all going to have a say and input into what that looks like. Don't forget that how we return to participate will be one of our guiding principles as well. We continue to have a seat at the table with Eric, with our youth sports roundtable. And then we're going to continue to look at information from our member schools and where we're at in trends. And Craig, as we start to see things in chat too, I think we should address how we look at each individual activity and or sport if now is the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's what I want you to think about as we get ready for this committee to have their actual first meeting today. We are putting together some guiding principles, philosophy statements that we'll ask every time we come up with an idea. And the framework that we're going to develop, and Bob and I go back and forth on this obviously, is it is our intent to try to provide for you return to participation protocols that philosophically meet the things that we know need to take place and that you've shared with us. We're going to look at it systemically with broad strokes, meaning what does this look like overall as an organization, the return to participation, and then we'll get right down to the very fine details of the sport-specific participation. So know that we're looking at this from a systemic, global, entire state, entire 500-member school approach, and then we'll get right down to the individual activities that we offer. So Bob, I'll turn to you and we can talk a little bit now about the guiding principles.
Yeah, so when we think about these principles, obviously health and safety are of utmost importance. Again, we talked about the returning to learning. That will guide us as well as to when and where we can do some of the things that we offer. Again, you heard from us that we're going to try and provide that opportunity for each sport and activity to find a place to play and or participate throughout this year. You'll see various scenarios. We continue to hear about flipping seasons. That's not language that we're going to use. What we will do is we will look at each sport activity again and figure out when is the best time for them to play or participate and what guides that conversation. We will communicate with the stakeholders in place with those decisions that are made, and we'll use this task force again to assist us with that. We want to try and be fair and equitable and provide balance. I think as conversations go, if we lose one sport, what does that mean for males or females that participate in that sport or activity? We need to be financially responsible. It needs to fit into our model, needs to fit in your model in terms of being able to happen financially. And then that we're going to try and apply guidelines consistently and fairly. As Craig said as well, we're going to go, we'll take a look at it system-wide from a large, more global view, and then get right down to those specific details for each sport and or activity. Craig, do you want to touch further on the timeline? I think we've covered that, but if there's anything I missed, let me know.
No, absolutely, Bob. You've covered most of it. So as I mentioned earlier, the first committee meeting will be for 30 minutes today just to lay the groundwork, like we've done with you with the lead liaisons and the lead network. And there will be a number of meetings in the next couple of weeks. And how we need you to stay continued connected with us is we will work with liaisons as we start putting together these frameworks for a return to participation to seek information from you, just like you've shared with us in the chat. And so you will have a voice in this. And this has been imperative to us from the start of these lead calls. And so Bob went over the guiding principles. We'll start to create multiple frameworks of what participation could look like, what it will look like, some options. And then the other thing too, and I just shared this with our group this morning, you know, the area I spend most of my time is in eligibility. And so we also have to review all of our existing rules, policies, bylaws, and any guidelines that might impact a return to participation. And a similar example to what I've just said would be the waiver of the expiration date of pre-participation physical clearances. When we see a situation that you bring to us as we return to participation, we put the time in to address it, run it through all the right people, get board approval, and we got the extension on those physical clearances. So these are the things that this group will really be looking at in a very short amount of time as we get ready to present options for the August 3rd and 4th meeting. Eric, anything else you want to add to that one that Bob and I may not have touched on?
No, I think you've done a really nice job, and I see some questions in the chats, and I know that the committee, or the task force, I should say, that's going to come together is going to have a really strategic way of taking a look at lots of different options. And so we're trying not to box into any particular items right now and really kind of take a look at each activity individually, compare it against the guiding principles, consider where and how it might fit into a season or into a time frame in the year. And I know summer is also one of those discussion points. Can simply offer that in my conversations with states across the nation, they too are looking at all of these different options. Some are talking about, based on some college models out there, of a January to the end of June kind of model, and they're taking a look at it. New Mexico's one that's been out in front and made decisions around football and soccer moving later into the year, but they're really being strategic about 8 to 10 week seasons and creating a situation where they reduce overlaps to less than 2 weeks. And so, you know, there's many different examples, and as you know from the other entities around colleges, et cetera, they're pushing things back, but they're not canceling yet, and they're looking for options or opportunities. We know that multiple sport participants is a very regular thing in Minnesota, so I think that our committee is going to take a look at how things can fit together by activity as well. So I think it's just important to know that the task force is going to be really thoughtful and take a lot of information in.
Perfect. Thanks.
Craig, this is Frank White. I apologize. This is the first time I'm on one of these meetings, but as everyone is thinking about returning to participation, and this came up the other day at the board meeting, I've talked to some additional officials yesterday. In light of at the board meeting, Jason saying for football, there's only 500 registered officials. Football is one of those demographics that has a number of older officials, just like volleyball. So as everyone is preparing, I would suggest that the athletic directors, maybe right now, as you're also beginning to plan, you may want to reach out to who assigns officials, because generally, I understand Jason said we need 1,500 plus, and if there's only 500 registered right now, it also says that's going to be one of our difficulties. And unfortunately, officials are always the last thing to be thought about. That's a big impact. And I don't suggest that keeps us from returning to participation, but it's one of those things that I think each of you as members or athletic directors take into consideration and know what your situation is going to be in your conference and get with those individuals that assign. I think that's going to be extremely important.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. I do know from our conversations, emails, and text messages with our member schools, officials is a high priority. They've already been looking into it. And from a more global perspective, as this return to participation committee looks at all aspects of a return to participation, availability of officials generally across the state, as well as individually and geographically in your communities, will be part of our discussions. I did also want to mention too here, excuse me, that I just got a message from Laura here. Hang on a second. Bob, can you address that text from Laura that she just sent?
Sure. Craig, if I could too, we've heard from a number of ADs, and to Frank's point, we know what you're doing with officials and those that are assigning, and already have those conversations in place as well. So thanks for your continued work with officials as well.
Yeah, I just had it pop up, Bob. I lost my screen on my phone. So one of the things we want you to do too, as we gather information, this will help the Return to Participation Committee. And thanks to Laura for the reminder. Could you put, all of you who are part of this call today, can you start to put your questions around our guiding principles that we presented to you? So take a look at that slide again, our guiding principles, and then we want you to put questions into the chat around those. So remember that whatever your thoughts are and your needs are and your questions are for your specific school and your programs, as well as your greater participation community, they're all important. And so we'd like to get that from you. And I see Jody just put that in the chat as well. So it's important for us as we gather information. And again, we're going to use your lead liaisons as well to work with you to continue to gather information for this task force.
Yeah, and Craig, if I could,
yeah, absolutely.
A good question from John in Chaska around what return to learning looks like and what might that mean for eligibility and or mobility of students. And that will be one of our guiding principles. I see that under, making sure that our decisions are fair and equitable would be at least one of the principles in which that fits. So those are great examples of things that we need to consider as we look at the flexibility around when we have our seasons. And again, to reiterate, we plan on starting on Monday, August 17th for our fall season with planning in place on creating options if that should not occur.
Right, and thanks, Bob, for bringing up John's specific question, because this is a perfect example of what we've been doing in the league office for several months. We have already been thinking about a transient population, split families, loss of job, loss of home, students transferring, and none of those situations fit our normal appeal process or our transfer eligibility process. So from that specific question, I can tell you these are the kinds of things we've been talking about as a staff at the league since March 13th. And so these are the kinds of items also that will be shared in the Return to Participation Task Force as they get ready to present options for participation. And Bob hit another good topic I want to mention to you is, yes, just like we did for the summer waiver period, June 1, we were working intently towards June 1st, but we told you we might have to have alternate plans that resulted in a June 15th start and a reduction of the no contact window, but then an additional week. These are the kinds of things we're looking at too as August 17th gets closer for us and that return to participation. What will that look like? What are the other options available? And so those are the daily conversations of league staff, and they'll be really immersed in it. This task force will be immersed in this in the next 2 weeks. Bob, other items with this task force?
No, I think we just have to remember that we're transitioning into our fall season. That's where the conversation is. And the detailed information that you get from us will look like it normally does. Remember, the summer coaching waiver period is very different in terms of our governance. There will be far more detail for you that will assist you as we plan for the fall. We hear a lot of talk about the fall and the spring. Let's not forget about our winter opportunities, right? All of our seasons will be impacted in some way, shape, or form, and will be identified and acknowledged in our return to participation. It's not just about one season, and to be quite honest, I don't see this task force completing on August 3rd or 4th. This will continue, I think, for some time. Craig?
Yeah, great points, Bob, because as we return to participation, there's one standard that we've told you since the beginning, and that is it's not going to look exactly like it did pre-COVID. There will be some changes. The other thing I want to address is that there are a lot of social media, emails, discussions about things that the league has proposed for the return to participation, like flipping seasons or moving specific sports. We want you to understand this. If we haven't shared it with you in our lead calls, or we haven't shared it with you through our board of directors, or we haven't shared it with you through the lead liaisons, it didn't come from us. And there's been a number of times where in the last couple months, you've heard things and it's ended up in the chat and we've addressed them. We always get you the best information as timely as we can, seeking support from all those that we need to. So with our board support, with your support, the liaisons, I think that what we've done over the last 3 months has demonstrated that collectively, we're going to get to that common goal, which is health and safety for a return to participation. So if you're hearing something out there or you get an email, let us know and we can respond to it. Bob and I had a couple this morning already that we said, no, there's not been any of that discussion here at the league. So you will get it directly from us. Eric has been really, really great at providing you the information coming from the board, the executive committee, and those state committees that he's been serving and working with. You get it as quickly as we can process it for you. So just keep that in mind, and a reminder too, the last final things for next week, answer and provide information on the guiding principles for the return to participant task force. Also, any questions that are specific to your communities, get that in there, and then we will group them and address them like we normally do. Bob, Eric, Laura, Jody, anything else to add at the end of this as we let them go?
If there's anything on chat, Jody or Laura, that you're seeing, otherwise, no. Thank you again for your participation. Remember, this network will continue for the foreseeable future. We greatly appreciate your participation.
Eric, anything else?
Good job, and just there are random questions in chat, but I think we can address those through the correspondence after the meeting.
Thanks to everyone for your time, and I would simply say that there are a lot of groups that are going to be making decisions, and some are going to impact certain things. I see things like transportation and size of crowds and all of those things, and those are typically not going to be governed by us, but certainly we're going to share that information directly, and we're going to continue to work in concert with all of those decision-making groups and the governance in the particular areas. We know that you too in your areas are going to have a lot of decisions to make, taking the guidance and the requirements and putting them into play, because no two schools are the same and no two districts are the same. So we'll continue to be here, we'll be available, continue to reach out as needed. But again, as Craig said, you know, our information is really direct and straightforward. If you listened in on workshops or the board meeting, you heard candid conversation, but you didn't hear, we've got a plan that we're just waiting to roll out. That is not where we are, and this task force has a lot of work to do as we go forward, but a lot of faith that they're going to do a great job. So thanks to everybody again. Craig, back to you.
Thanks, gang. I kept you 2 minutes beyond the 30 minutes. You know me, I like to try to keep it right on that 30-minute, but we do extend it when you do have additional information and questions. Some great questions already in the chat as I'm scanning them. We'll get to them. And again, we are going to look globally, statewide, but we're also really going to focus in and narrow in on what's happening in your specific school community. Thanks, gang. We'll be back next week on the lead call, lead liaisons next week, and then our task force starts today with its first call at 2:30. Thanks for so many of you joining today, and we'll see you next week.